The deadliest weapon in the world is a Marine and his rifle. It is your killer instinct which must be harnessed if you expect to survive in combat. Your rifle is only a tool. It is a hard heart that kills. If your killer instincts are not clean and strong, you will hesitate at the moment of truth. You will not kill. You will become dead, Marine.
Full Metal Jacket isn't really a film about the Vietnam War. It's a film that's more about war itself, or the phenomenon of war. But what many miss is it's also a film about change, and those opening lines that you heard from Gunnery Sergeant Hartman, that it takes a hard heart to kill, and how one becomes the minister of death that prays for war. But I feel that there are still many out there who struggle to understand the film and what Kubrick was trying to get across. And while critics and viewers struggled to get beyond the first part of the film, seeing as that the first part of the film is the most memorable, it required multiple viewings for people to get a proper grasp of the film and what Kubrick was trying to get across. To get a proper grasp of this story is something that does not come easy, and that's what we're going to be doing over the course of this video, talking about the actual themes and the overall message of the film Full Metal Jacket. But of course, before we do that, I need to break down how the video is going to go. So think of the first section of this video to talk about the misconceptions of the film and exactly what it is that Stanley Kubrick and screenwriter Michael Herr were actually aiming for. The next part, I'll talk about change, which of course is the Parris Island section of the video, and of course there's going to be a heavy emphasis placed on the three main characters, Joker, Gunnery Sergeant Hartman, and Gomer Pyle. The following part will be about Joker's time in Vietnam, his time with the Lust Hog Squad, and all the chaos and contradictions that come during war. There's also going to be a great deal placed on the additional characters in the film, so don't worry, no stone will be left untouched. That will then be followed up by a section on the realities of war, and the section to close out the video will be talking about the hardening of the man, asking that question if these men lose their humanity. And with that out of the way, let's talk about Full Metal Jacket. The film is not the typical three-act structure. It's really three parts, a lot like the source material, The Short Timers, written by Gustav Hasford. By the way, if you were to come across this book, it would probably cost you 3 digits on Amazon. Just figure I would throw that out there before getting into this story, and don't worry, there will be a link to the audiobook in the description box. But there are many misconceptions about the film. There are some out there who think that it's the perfect anti-war piece, and I'm here to tell you now that that is not the case. As a matter of fact, Stanley Kubrick went out of his way to not make an anti-war film, but to do a film that was based more on military structure and how one becomes a warrior. It is not an anti-war film along the lines of Paths of Glory, which is a film that I have already reviewed and explained that film there was not really an anti-war film when properly looked at, and when you actually get to know more and more about Kubrick, you might come away thinking to yourself that the true anti-war film of his filmography is Fear and Desire. More on that later. But screenwriter Michael Herr, who actually spent close to a decade having conversations with Stanley Kubrick about this film. By the way, Michael Herr, writer of the book Dispatches, a former Vietnam War correspondent himself and journalist, he's probably written one of the greatest pieces of work on the Vietnam War, and that book Dispatches, I would highly advise you guys go check out. But Herr had stated that Stanley Kubrick was actually not opposed to war. If anything, you could argue that maybe he was opposed to stupid wars, but not the idea of war itself. Going back to the beginning of the video, the film is not really a Vietnam War film, even though Vietnam is obviously the setting. The film is more about the phenomenon of war and the process it takes in becoming a warrior. Something that both left and right-leaning critics have missed. But I must give you some of the statements from screenwriter Michael Herr, who wrote most of the screenplay along with Hasford, who actually left the project due to disagreements with Herr, but Michael Herr did set the record straight. Once again, Stanley was not opposed to war and even collected guns. Now, that is, like I said, does not mean that he was pro-war. He understood that wars were sometimes necessary, but also unnecessary. Once again, he wanted to avoid making an explicitly anti-war film and focus more on the reality of the system and how it strips men down. And of course, that there being the phenomenon of war, which is where we get to the duality of man. And while it is definitely at the heart of the storytelling, it's more of a device rather than a point. Once again, we go back to Michael Herr. It's about the psychological and brutal conditioning of young men into Marines and how the best part of a person is broken down and restructured for killing. Of course, this right here will be important a little bit later on, but that right there is really as deep as it gets as far as the duality of man is concerned. However, there is also the Jungian thing, which also is a component of the duality of man, and we shall talk about that momentarily. Kubrick's vision, which was explained in multiple interviews where he discussed the phenomena of war itself. Some of those interviews will be linked below, but there was a callback to the Jungian thing, Carl Jung's exploration into the human or the shadow and the destructive and primal nature of men during war. So therefore the film was designed to be more psychological in nature, and this is why some say it isn't even really a war film. It's more of a Kubrick film than anything else, but there are many more misconceptions, and this of course was one of them, and that of course is the use of sexually coded language.
Do you want number one, Forky?
Something wrong there, Chief?
She said, no, bum, we saw, brother.
Hey, what the motherfucker?
She said, so, brother, chupoku.
My guess is that Michael Herr chose to put this type of language into the script because he understood the language aspect of the military, especially during war, very well given to the fact that as a reporter during the Vietnam War and on the ground, we as veterans use sexually coded language to help us better relate to what it is that we are doing. Our jobs, and our job, of course, is killing the enemy. I could give you personal examples of where language is used, the situations, and what kind of language would be used for each single situation, but we don't speak during combat as if to say that it's an intellectual seminar. It's part of the reason why it is that this film is so popular even with Marines to this day. More direct, sexually coded, obscene language sticks harder than long words. Just saying, bigger words oftentimes do not suffice and even trip people up during scenes where, let's just say, the environment is stressful. But speaking of stress, let us get to part one of this video and what it takes to become a U.S. Marine. So let's talk about Parris Island, or the change section of the video.
What's your name, scumbag?
Sir, Private Brown, sir!
Bullshit. From now on, you're Private Snowball. Do you like that name?
Sir, yes, sir!
Well, there's one thing that you won't like, Private Snowball. They don't serve fried chicken and watermelon on a daily basis in my mess hall.
Sir, yes, sir!
You, John Wayne? Is this me?
Who said that? Well, no shit. What have we got here? Fucking comedian, private joker. I admire your honesty. Hell, I like you. You can come over to my house and fuck my sister.
Stripped of not only your hair, but also your identity, and given a brand new identity, which of course is the nickname that you were given, this right here is obviously designed to show the audience that once you join, you lose all your individuality and you're being put back together to form one single unit. A cog in the machine is basically what you are. Harkening back to the beginning of the video, this right here is obviously the most popular part of the film, the boot camp segment, mostly due to Arlie Ermey's performance and all the obscenities he throws out there, of which some I cannot show you in this video. But of course, if you've seen the film, then you obviously know how funny they are. I don't want the video to get demonetized like my original video on this film. Still, what we remember most about the boot camp segment is the dynamic between Hartman and Private Pyle, also known as Leonard Lawrence. In the book, The Short Timers, it's actually Leonard Pratt, but this right here is what we mostly remember. We remember the dynamic between these two individuals.
Are you through grinning?
Sir, yes, sir.
Bullshit, I can't hear you.
Sir, yes, sir.
Bullshit, I still can't hear you. Sounds off like you've got a pair.
Sir, yes, sir.
That's enough. Get on your feet.
And given Pyle's pudgy physical frame, his childlike demeanor, it's pretty obvious that this guy was going to be the platoon's downfall from the very start. None of this seems to help him out, and of course it makes him a bigger target for Hartman. At the same time, it also makes him a bit of a bigger project, but a little bit more on that later. The childlike and slow Pyle, which it does make you wonder how it is that he even got to Parris Island. Remember, there is no background of these characters, none is given before we meet them, but he struggles. Eventually lead to the moment where Joker is put in charge of him. We all remember the famous Virgin Mary scene, and a lot of people love to cite this scene as Joker standing up to Gunnery Sergeant Hartman, which to a certain degree he does. But if anything, it's really just him letting Hartman know that he knows that this is a game and there's not really any way out of any situation that Hartman puts him in.
Make me want to vomit! You goddamn communist heathen, you had best sound off that you love the Virgin Mary, or I'm gonna stomp your guts out. Now, you do love the Virgin Mary, don't you?
Sir, negative, sir!
Private Joker, are you trying to offend me?
Sir, negative, sir! Sir, the private believes that any answer he gives will be wrong, and the senior drill instructor will beat him harder if he reverses himself, sir!
Who's your squad leader, scumbag?
Sir, the private squad leader's Private Snowball, sir!
Joker takes the job that Hartman has given him, the task of fixing Private Pyle. And initially, Pyle does take.
Operating rod handle. Operating rod guide. Left one or the right. You just throw your other leg over. Attaboy. That's it. Now just pull the next one over.
The childlike tendencies in Pyle while they are still there. Joker's way of getting to Pyle obviously shows some signs of working. However, this right here is where you see that the childlike tendencies of Leonard Lawrence, Private Pyle, they can't be suppressed, and that of course culminates in the jelly donut scene.
Jesus H. Christ. Private Pyle, why is your footlocker unlocked?
Sir, I don't know, sir!
Private Pyle, if there is one thing in this world that I hate, it is an unlocked footlocker. You know that, don't you?
Sir, yes, sir!
If it wasn't for dickheads like you, there wouldn't be any thievery in this world, would there?
Sir, no, sir!
Get down!
This situation gave Hartman an opportunity to put all of Pyle's screw-ups on the platoon, which of course is going to breed some form of resentment. Now, in my original video on this film, I took a lot of time to talk about Pyle and how, for the most part, he's quite frankly useless. Some have looked at the situation where Joker is arresting Pyle and they think that Pyle is in fact very, very much a useless person. However, that's not what's really going on here. What Joker is doing is he is going out of his way to ensure that Pyle is at least presentable so that way the rest of the platoon does not get screwed up, seeing how it is that Joker is in charge of Pyle, so therefore Pyle is Joker's responsibility. It ultimately leads to that famous blanket party scene where Pyle is beaten in his sleep. And Joker partakes in this beating. Even though Joker, you can tell, did not want to take part in this, it makes the whole situation much more worse when you hear that childlike cry out of Pyle once he realizes what's happened.
Ow! Ow!
Joker can only cover his ears, but still, it's at this moment in time that Pyle, well, I would say he more or less wakes up and finds himself in a trance, and next thing you know, for some odd reason, Pyle begins to improve. I'll discuss what really happened to Pyle here momentarily, but I want to go ahead and get through the boot camp segment before we actually break down what actually happened to Pyle and to give you guys my actual thoughts on this. But still, Pyle does in fact improve, even earning some praise from Gunnery Sergeant Hartman.
Outstanding, Private Pyle. I think we finally found something that you do well.
Sir, yes, sir! The private's fit general orders to quit my post, only when properly relieved, sir!
What's this weapon's name, Private Pyle?
Sir, the private's weapon's name is Charlene, sir!
Private Pyle, you are definitely born again hard. Hell, I may even allow you to serve as a rifleman in my beloved corps.
Sir, yes, sir!
And does graduate with the rest of the platoon. However, it's from here that we get that famous head scene where Pyle begins to go through the motions, and those motions are of a meltdown. A meltdown that leads to Pyle not only killing Hartman, but also himself.
Major malfunction, numbnuts! Didn't Mommy and Daddy show you enough attention when you were a child?
One way of thinking about it is that, and this is one of the things that I think could have actually happened in this case, was that Joker taking the more motherly, more patient approach, because let's be honest, he was much, much more patient with Pyle. This right here may have actually served to keep Pyle's inner and, of course, outer childlike tendencies intact throughout this entire process. There's more that we'll get into here in a second, but I think that right there could be one explanation. This is just the shortened, summarized version of what happened to Gomer Pyle, but the thing is this. Several have theorized that what might have happened was that Joker taking the more motherly type approach to Pyle, who is childlike, it's believed that it may have caused a bit of a corruption in the overall training, which makes me kind of wonder if this was a real life situation. What if Joker had not actually been tasked with training Pyle, and what if Pyle had continued on the way he was going? He more than likely still would have gotten through Parris Island. Trust me, there are people out there who do slip through the cracks. I know this, I'm one of them. But still, it makes you kind of wonder what might have happened if Joker had not been brought in to assist with Pyle, if there had not been special focus put on him. Going back to the whole duality of man, how it is that the best part of a person is being broken down and then being rebuilt and repackaged into a combat killing machine. My feeling is that Pyle was just way too childlike, and it wasn't so much his inner child, because Pyle, for the most part, is in fact very much a child. You even see this in some of his facial expressions, even the expressions on his face that sort of reveal some form of menace, which, by the way, is a trope of Kubrick films. You still see someone who is childlike. But I really think that what happened in this case is that Pyle's inner child, because this is who Pyle was in the process of being corrupted. Now, there is something else too about Pyle, and this kind of goes back to about what might have happened if Joker had not been tasked with fixing Pyle, and that, of course, is the animal mother theory. I'm going to take a very brief second on this. So there's a theory out there that animal mother is really just Gomer Pyle reincarnated. I mean, there's certain little triggers, certain little signs, like, for example, how animal mother has got I am become death on his helmet, the body language, the way he stands. Rob Ager did a very good video on this, and I even did a video on this on my second channel, and I'll link both of those videos in the description box. But it makes you wonder what would have happened to Pyle had he survived and actually gotten through boot camp the way he was going. It makes you think to yourself that he might have become very much like Animal Mother. But speaking of Animal Mother, it's time to get to part 2, and that right there is Joker in Vietnam. So let's get to that.
Be sure you only fuck the ones that cough.
And what he knows you ain't had time to learn.
No!
These boots are made.
We get to Vietnam, and Joker, now a combat correspondent writing for Stars and Stripes magazine, finds himself putting spins on stories that might paint the war in a negative light.
Say one kill. Make it a sapper or an officer. Which?
Whichever you say.
Grunts like reading about dead officers.
Okay, an officer. How about a general?
Joker, maybe you'd like our guys to read the paper and feel bad. And in case you didn't know it, this is not a particularly popular war.
Nonetheless, Joker, feigning his desire for combat with sarcasm, soon finds himself, after the base is attacked, on a choppered Hue along with Rafterman. And this is where we get the famous door gunner scene, immediately followed up by yet one of those beautiful long shots by Stanley Kubrick of the mass grave. This, to me, is sort of the point of the entire story, to showcase that war itself is full of chaos, contradictions, and not everything is so black and white. It's even set not to the prostitute scene, but actually the scene in the tent where you actually get the first case of one of those contradictions. That right there, of course, being, well, just listen to the song in the background.
I am fucking bored to death, man. I gotta get back in the shit. I ain't heard a shot fired in anger in weeks.
Joker's so tough, you eat the boogers out of a dead man's nose. Then ask for seconds.
Listen up, Pilgrim. A day without blood is like a day without sunshine.
Yeah, typically in a combat zone, you don't tend to think about a song that talks about love and marriage, but still. And there is more from the sequence involving Lieutenant Lockhart that we could speak about. We'll get to that more towards the end when we get to the realities of war section, but let me get back on track. So let's talk about the back-to-back sequences, the one with the door gunner and the other one with the mass grave. So with the door gunner, you think to yourself, this guy's an absolute psycho. He's absolutely insane. Joker asks him, how could you shoot women and children? And of course, this is what you get.
Any women or children? Sometimes! How can you shoot women and children?
Easy! You just don't lead them so much! Ain't war hell?
I let that play a little bit longer than I wanted because that whole bit about ain't war hell, that's kind of the point, and don't worry, we'll get to that a little bit later. But then when you get to the mass grave, you see that the NVA, they have decided to kill anybody who has decided not to conform. Once again, this right here is Kubrick showing you that war itself is full of chaos, contradictions, and also half-truths and just outright lies. It's not so black and white, it's actually more shades of gray than anything else. And believe me, there's more to take from this scene, and we'll get there momentarily, but the story moves, and with the story moving, we move to Joker with the Lust Hog Squad. Now, I'm not going to go through the entire sequence of Joker seeing the men in rest, but don't worry, Crazy Earl is definitely a big part of the realities of war segment. Just kind of throwing that out there before we go any further. But Joker actually sees with Cowboy and Animal Mother and 8-Ball and the rest of the group exactly what it is that grunts go through. They even go through an assault in Hue, and the platoon's lieutenant is killed in combat. Now, the men ultimately rally around Crazy Earl, and they take the position. And it's from taking that position that we get that bit of euphoria that comes from a job well done.
Oh, well, everybody's heard about the bird. The bird's a winner. Well, the bird is a winner.
And from here, once again, we see the men basically coping under fire. This entire sequence, I think, is designed to show you that there's a lot of things that go on during combat that you would not expect. You would expect these men to have their rifles pointed in one direction, ready to shoot, but the thing is this here. You can't really see the enemy, and of course, to go on top of that, you see that the men, they are coping with this in their own little way. Some of this I can't play for you guys because the last video got knocked for language, and I don't want the video to be demonetized, but still, you see that men find ways of coping. A great example of this would also be the sequence where the lieutenant's body and another fellow devil dog, they are sitting around just kind of looking and kind of lamenting on the fact that these two men had died. Some of these men's responses include, go easy bros, Semper Fi, they died for a good cause, but of course there's also Animal Mother.
Go easy bros.
Better you than me.
Now, initially you may think to yourself that Animal Mother is cold-hearted, and of course the rest of what he says to Rafterman might make you think this way, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. I tend to think that it's closer to what 8-Ball said when we first met Animal Mother.
Animal Mother's one of the finest human beings in the world. All he needs is somebody to throw hand grenades at him the rest of his life.
More on that later. And this is where we get to the realities of war segment. So brace yourself, grab yourself a drink. We're going to be here for a bit.
When we're in Hue City, it's like a war, you know, like what I thought about a war, what I thought a war was supposed to be. There's the enemy, kill them.
And Cowboy would later on in that interview go on to say this.
Boys, I'm not real keen on some of these fellas that are supposedly on our side. I keep meeting them coming the other way. Yeah.
The realities of war is that war is not so black and white. As I have said throughout this entire video, and I said in my original video, chaos, contradictions, shades of gray, all that type of stuff. And you see that really in the interview segment, because each single Marine seems to have a different response when asked about our involvement in Vietnam. You go from Cowboy showing concern, you hear 8 Ball going about the fact that it's a joke. You got Doc J, who chooses to mock LBJ, and of course you've also got Animal Mother, who speaks about how it is that if we're here we might as well go ahead and win it. However, to me it's Crazy Earl who I think said exactly what most men were probably feeling at that time.
I don't know. I belong in Vietnam. I'll tell you that.
I belong in Vietnam. I can tell you that. What Crazy Earl is doing is he's telling you he doesn't really care about the politics. He doesn't really care about what's really going on at home. He's got a job to do. And Crazy Earl, of course, is a bit of a leader for these men. We mostly think about that scene where Earl is with that dead soldier, and we tend to forget that in the assault going into Hue, when the lieutenant is killed, the men ultimately rally around him, and he leads the assault. There's also something else about war that oftentimes gets, how do I say, brushed over. Do you guys remember when I brought up Lieutenant Lockhart earlier, and how it is I talked about how it is that Joker is, for the most part, just writing puff pieces. He's trying to put a positive spin on what's not exactly a popular war. Well, there's a whole another 3 or 4 seconds of that conversation that oftentimes goes over people's heads. So let me replay it for you.
Okay, an officer. How about a general?
Joker, maybe you'd like our guys to read the paper and feel bad. And in case you didn't know it, this is not a particularly popular war. Now, it is our job to report the news that these why are we here civilian newsmen ignore.
The why are you here's, the people who are questioning our involvement, they always tend to give the boys an unfair shake when they get back home. Vietnam, as you know, was not exactly a popular war, and these men faced protests mostly from the political left, the anti-war crowd. But there was also a whole nother group of people, I talked about this in my video on the film First Blood, that sort of saw the men as damaged, and they were supposed to be the support system when the men got home. Of course, I'll link that video in the description box, but oftentimes the soldier or Marine's perspective is oftentimes not mentioned. It's sometimes just glossed over for a greater point that's being made by, well, like I said before, the protesters, the anti-war crowd, the politicians, and yes, even those who are supposed to be the support system. In Full Metal Jacket, Kubrick was also giving you the soldier's perspective, or in this case, the Marine's perspective. He did this through the interview section, and they kind of told you how he really felt. However, there was something about this film that also found a way to rub critics the wrong way, and that, of course, is the whole notion that the film, for the most part, was a bit of a letdown for some people because they were expecting the end to be some kind of a great big giant bombastic fight. However, they didn't get that. So let me break down another reality of war for you. If not said before, the Vietnam War felt a lot more cloak and dagger. It was a guerrilla war. They weren't just fighting NVA standing army, they were fighting the VC. And this right here becomes apparent at the very end of the film when we get that final patrol. So basically what happens is the Marines are going back into Hue to check an area that's supposed to be deserted. Supposedly, the NVA, the VC, they have decided to leave and head back across the Perfume River. Marines, of course, are just going to go scout the area to see if anybody's left behind, and of course, Crazy Earl is killed by one of those booby traps set by the enemy. From here, Cowboy assumes command of the squad. He leads the men best he can, but he ends up leading them into a spot where a sniper is lying in wait. 8 Ball volunteers to go across. He's eventually shot. Eventually, Doc J goes to go get 8 Ball. He is also shot as well, and we all remember what happens after this. Animal Mother, of course, gives us that famous charge.
Stand down, Mother! That's a direct order!
Charging towards the sniper, Animal Mother throws caution to the wind. Ultimately, Doc J and 8 Ball are dead. He even acknowledges this, that they're wasted. But the platoon eventually moves up, and Cowboy is sadly killed. The squad sees this, and at the behest of Animal Mother, they choose to go get revenge. They choose to go take down the sniper. And of course, it results in them ultimately taking out the sniper. Now, some people have actually gone out of their way to say that the combat footage in this film is pretty bad. I disagree with that. As a matter of fact, when facing a sniper or being pinned down and you need to move, it wouldn't be uncommon for smoke to get popped to screen the enemy to move around. This was actually very good. So, yeah, this right here was actually a pretty accurate representation of what would happen, or as close to accurate as you could get on film at that time. But we all know what happens. Eventually, Joker comes up on the sniper, freezes up, he's almost killed, and he's saved by Rafterman. It was a letdown for people because they thought that they were going to get something more bombastic. They thought they were going to get an actual fight, an actual good old-fashioned shootout, but no, that right there was not the case. Maybe the thinking was that they were going to come up on an ambush and find a way to survive, but this was not the case. Instead, Kubrick once again shows you the reality of war. He shows you that sometimes wars are not fought in the conventional manner, a lot like what Cowboy said at the beginning of this segment. This young girl, maybe no more than 14 or 15 years old, probably with nothing but rice on her and ammo, she has found a way to hold up an entire squad of Marines, potentially a company, maybe even a battalion, who knows, maybe even a regiment of Marines from crossing the river that night. This is how the war was fought. And of course, people remember this scene because they remember the debate between Cowboy and Joker on whether they should kill the girl or leave her behind, or leave her to die, leave her to suffer. Joker, of course, chooses the humane option. And before we move on to the final segment of the video, we talk about the hardening of the man and asking the question whether these men lose their humanity. I need to go ahead and say it one more time, as if I haven't said it already. The entire purpose behind this film was to give you the more psychological factor when it goes into warfare, while at the exact same time showing you the realities of war. Like I said, many people were let down, and they were let down because, well, it was just a little bit too real for them. As close to what actually happened or what went on a daily basis in Vietnam as possible. And it's not just Vietnam, this has happened in other wars as well, hence the reason why it is that the film is more about the phenomenon of war and the psychological side of it. But that right there brings us to the last part, which is the hardening of the man, or asking the question, do these men lose their humanity? Or in the case of Full Metal Jacket, did these men lose their humanity? So let's get there. Throughout the entire film, we notice how sarcastic Joker is. I mean, there's even this bit here during the interviews.
I wanted to meet interesting and stimulating people of an ancient culture and kill them. I wanted to be the first kid on my block to get a confirmed kill.
And it's a key indicator that Joker's humanity is still intact, meaning he never really lost his humanity. Now, there is the whole sequence at the end, and of course I played a little bit of that before we leaned into this last section of the video, and that right there, of course, is how he chooses to put down the sniper humanely, where it is that Animal Mother, on the other hand, wanted to let the girl just suffer and die. Truth be told is the actual ending of the film was supposed to be a little bit darker. Don't worry, I'll link the making of in the description box. But this right here is supposed to signal whether these men's humanity is still there. This entire section is designed to show you whether humanity has been lost, if something has been lost inside the man. But it also goes back to duality of man. The best part being broken down and restructured into the thing that would make someone an effective combat killing machine. The truth be told is this right here. We don't lose our humanity. We don't lose who we are. And I think that Stanley Kubrick, in the final section of the film, which of course is the famous ending to the film where the men are marching out and chanting the Mickey Mouse Club theme song, this right here is the signal to the audience that the humanity is still very, very much intact.
M-O-U-S-E, Mickey Mouse, Mickey Mouse, Mickey Mouse, Mickey Mouse. Forever let us hold our banner high, 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 high.
It also goes back to the shadow. You're leaning at the darker aspects of who you are. This right here is what comes out of people during times of war. And that right there is what Stanley Kubrick was trying to get across with this film. It's part of the reason why it is that this video is called Understanding Full Metal Jacket, unlike the previous video where I had talked about how it was really just about chaos and contradictions. No, it's chaos, contradictions. The fact that the war itself is not black and white, that war as a whole is not black and white, mostly shades of gray. However, what gets lost is the psychological aspect, and that's what Full Metal Jacket was actually exploring. Or another way to say it is how it is that one basically changes. And oftentimes it changes for the better. The man hardens, but what ends up happening is that you learn to sort of switch it on and off. You learn to understand that you have the capability, and oftentimes it's not to do killing mercilessly or to do it indiscriminately, but oftentimes as a part of your job. You're doing this to protect the other men around you. I mean, go back and look at Animal Mother. You think this man is a cold brute, but then he goes out of his way to save his comrades. Truly not a man who's cold-hearted. When Cowboy is laying there dying, they go out of their way to not only try to save him, but to a certain extent even comfort him. These are not cold-hearted, cold-blooded killers. They're just simply U.S. Marines. They've been trained to do a terrible thing, whether you agree with the war or not agree with the war. But no, these men are not soulless. These men are not cold. They are just simply doing the job. They're just simply doing the thing that they have been trained to do. And there are effects, things that go with the man for the rest of his life. But the fact of the matter is that these men are not soulless. These men are not heartless. They are just simply, as I pointed out before, they are the warrior class. They are what we would call the men that we send in to do the jobs that nobody else wants to do. So no, I end this video on saying that these right here are men that have been changed, for the most part, for the better. And no, they did not lose their humanity. And once again, that little bit at the very end signals to the audience that no, these men have not lost their humanity. And it's also something else that the film Full Metal Jacket does where other Vietnam War films do not. I've always favored Full Metal Jacket and Hamburger Hill because they showcase this side of the actual man in uniform versus a film like, say, Apocalypse Now, which is really more about a mission to go find another man in uniform that has gone off the reservation. Or in the case of Platoon, what many regard to be the best Vietnam War film ever made, but me personally, I feel that it actually does more to harm the reputation of the Vietnam veteran than anything else. That right there will be a video at a later date, but I've always found that Full Metal Jacket was one of the top films because it gave off the real actual truth of the matter, psychological, and showed you what war was really and truly like, and it didn't do it in a way that was designed to denigrate the man in uniform. But before we close down this video, I must say this. There is this great debate about how it is that this film is actually about the link between sex and violence. And oftentimes they use two sequences to sort of assert this. They use the sequences with the prostitutes. However, the thing is this right here. Go back to what I had said when I first opened this video. It's not 3 acts, it's 3 separate parts. In the second part, the Vietnam segment, it is pretty well put out there from the very beginning that paranoia is going to be very, very much a theme of this film.
You know, half these gooquards are serving officers in the Viet Cong. The other half have got TB.
These prostitutes are actually lieutenants in the NVA. Once again, going back to the whole notion of sometimes you don't know who your enemy is, especially during this conflict. But hey guys, that right there is just me. These right here are just my thoughts. You guys tell me what you think in the comment section. I would love to hear what you guys have got to say. If you made it this far into the video, thank you guys for watching. If you can, please hit the like button. Please consider subscribing. And also, please leave your thoughts on the film. Please leave your thoughts on the video in the comment section. Once again, love to hear what you guys have got to say. I'll see you guys later.